Good morning. The first item of business today is general questions, and we start with question number 1 from Rowley.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taken to address reports that rail travellers on the Fife Circle face poor journey experiences and that there are constant failures of service.
Minister Hamza Youssef.
I completely understand the frustration that poor performance can have on the customer experience, and do recognise, of course, that Scotrail has faced a number of challenges, particularly in the recent months of autumn and winter, which I fully expect to be addressed immediately. That is why Alex Hines, the MD of Scotrail Alliance, has instigated an independent review being taken forward by Nick Donovan as part of Scotrail's recovery measures, which is something I very much welcome. The sooner the performance challenges are addressed, the sooner, of course, passengers can enjoy the level of service they desire, but quite rightly they deserve. My officials at Transport Scotland continue to closely monitor and challenge Scotrail's performance, and will work with them as they develop and implement the actions to improve performance over the coming months.
Rowley.
Thank the Minister for that answer, and I'm pleased that he understands the frustration. I'm sure he can imagine the frustration. You're standing waiting on your train coming and the train goes right past. You're left there waiting an hour trying to get to your work. People are being late for their work. The Dunfermline Press have launched a campaign, Crush Hour. The name speaks for itself, but, you know, masses upon masses of rail users in Fife are horrified at the kind of service that they're getting. Will the Minister agree to meet with me so that we can go through the detail of all these problems? I think, you know, people have been patient, they've waited long enough. We need action. And will he consider taking the railways back into public ownership so that the profits can be invested in the railways and we can address these unacceptable situations that are happening within the Fife Circle rail route?
Minister.
Can I thank Alex Rowley for that? And he understood from my answer that I wasn't dismissing at all, of course, the concerns. I completely understand them. And I have been keeping up with Dunfermline Press's coverage very much on this. What I would do is try to wrap some context around this, which is in the early part of 2017, and indeed for most of 2017 until the autumn months, there was a significant improvement in Fife rail services, running at about 93–94%, but clearly in the autumn months they have not coped well, hence the reason for the independent review. I can also say that many MSPs from across the chamber who represent Fife and the surrounding areas have contacted me: Shirley Ann Somerville, Annabel Ewing, Jenny Go-Ruth and Liz Smith as well. So I know that there are a number of MSPs, as I say, from Fife that have raised that. I have spoken to Alex Hines this morning about this issue and others. I'm more than happy for my office to facilitate a meeting with those MSPs and others from Fife that might have an interest in rail service and rail performance with Alex Hines. Of course, I'd be more than happy to meet the MSP as well individually, but I think, of course, this is a matter for Scotrail, so therefore meeting with the MD would be the appropriate measure. So my office will facilitate that meeting if it is helpful. Clearly, there will be an upgrade, as the member probably knows, in the rolling stock later in 2018, early 2019, but people in Fife should not wait for that until they get an improvement in their service. So the immediate priority is getting that improvement in performance. In terms of his very last point, I understand his ideological position. I would just gently remind him, of course, it is the SNP government that has allowed a public sector bidder to bid for the railways for the first time, something that was denied by successive Labour governments in Westminster.
Mark Ruskell.
Thank you. The issue of stop-skipping that we're discussing here is a problematic one because stop-skipping is only treated as a partial cancellation, and therefore there are no financial penalties resulting from that. Does the Minister agree that in the new franchise that will come forward, that stop-skipping needs to be identified, there needs to be financial penalties applied to that?
I would just reiterate, of course, that when stops are skipped, that it does count as a PPM failure, and of course Scotrail are held to account for the PPM failures. And when it comes to financial fines, the Squire regime, which is the auditing regime, is probably the best auditing regime of any railway in the entire United Kingdom, and that has been borne out by the fact that Scotrail has been fined quite substantially when they failed to meet the very high criteria that we set them. But his point is one that I will certainly reflect on when it comes to future franchises, of course. But before getting to that end point of the franchise, we should be, of course, continuing that dialogue with Scotrail to minimise what is a practice which is unhelpful. And I should say, when I became Transport Minister, I did say to Scotrail that I expect them to minimise the skipping of stops during the peak hours in particular. That has happened, but I would go back to my answer to Alex Rowley that in the autumn months and winter months have clearly been challenging for Scotrail, and that is unwelcome.